Hey, what's up guys? I want to compare two cameras today, the Canon EOS RP, pretty new on the market, and the Fujifilm X-T3. I've been shooting on the T3 since about October. I've been shooting Fuji since about 2017. The T3 is a little bit deeper as far as being able to hold it, but Canon actually thought about this. So boom, for $88 more, you can get the Canon grip. It's pretty nice. It literally is just an extension. It doesn't get in the way of your card or your battery. You can just flip the door open. You can see that right there. And you can get access to pretty much everything. And it's not really awkward to use or operate. So if you do have bigger hands and you feel like you need the space, this I would think makes it pretty usable. In fact, I'd say with the grip, it's actually bigger than the R. So if you've held the Canon R, this will actually make your camera a little bit bigger than that. For me though, I didn't have a problem holding the T3. I didn't have a problem holding the RP without the grip. But with the grip, it's going to be almost the same price. So 88 bucks on top of 1300, and this one's 14 brand new. These cameras are almost the same price. So I thought it was worth it to compare these two. So let's start with the Fuji. First of all, I'd say that the viewfinder on this is amazing. The diopter works really well. If you wear glasses like me, and I don't like to wear glasses when I'm shooting, then the diopter works perfect with my prescription. It's not super crazy, but for me it maxed out. It was just fine. The color on the Fuji, and I would say that this is really what drew me to this camera in the first place. I think the colors, the raw colors, are fantastic, and it's also a great starting point. If you guys are shooting on Fuji, you know I'm talking about Provia, Astia, all those colors give you a good starting point before you even start editing, and especially if you're new to editing photos, it can be really intimidating to work with a raw file and try to pull something out that you think your client might be interested in. So pretty much what I do is mainly portraits. I do almost no video, so this is going to be a very non-spec based video. I don't really shoot video very much, so half of what this camera does doesn't necessarily apply to me. And that's first of all why the RP would even be something that I would be interested in, because obviously if you've watched any videos on the RP, everyone's talking about how there's no 1080 24 frames per second, and it's crop if you want to do 4K, which this camera would, I would say if you're doing a video comparison, would probably just blow this camera out of the water. However, I think that the RP has a lot to offer, but the diopter on the RP, equally as good. Didn't have any problems with it. The viewfinder is not as crisp, I guess, as the T3 is, but for me it's good enough. I would say the color on these two is actually comparable, and this is what really made me have to look at the Canon, is the colors on it. They're already famous for it. I didn't have a ton of experience with Canon, but after shooting it for obviously not too long, I just got it I think a couple weeks ago, and the colors on it are easy enough to work with for me. Alright, so let's talk autofocus. The eye autofocus on this Fuji is really, really good. I've shot the A7 III. I would say that this is almost on par with Sony. I know it's gonna, a lot of people might disagree with that, but it's not quite as easy to use. You do actually have to hit a function button and then activate it. You can't just hold a button to activate eye auto like you can on the Sony. But once it's activated, I'd say that the eye auto is pretty amazing. The autofocus in general on this camera is very fast. It doesn't matter if you're shooting continuous, single, it's still going to shoot I think at least 10 frames a second in boost mode. I don't know, I don't really shoot that fast very often, but this camera is kind of a ninja when it comes to grabbing something that's moving quickly and using continual autofocus. It doesn't slow it down. Come over to the RP, and continual autofocus does take you down another frame. I think it goes from 5 to 4 frames a second when you go into continual autofocus. However, I found that the touch to drag autofocus system was very easy to use, because I was initially hesitant to shoot a camera that does not feature a joystick, whereas the Fuji features a great joystick. But after shooting it, I would say that I actually prefer the touch to drag autofocus system. You can get it on the Sonys. I haven't used it on them, but as far as using it on the Canon, it's super easy to use. You can adjust to whatever side of the screen works for you. I know that if you are a left eye shooter, that this can cause some problems for you as far as where the buttons are laid out. But if you use your right eye like me, then this isn't going to be a problem for you. All right, so lenses. The Fuji lenses are amazing. They're ultra sharp. They're weather resistant, and I have tested this camera in the rain with the weather resistant lens, the 16 to 55, and I had absolutely no issues with it. And it was raining pretty hard. You do have to make sure that you have the cap over the hot shoe, and that you have the cap over this right here, your little flash sync right there. And I actually appreciate that the Fuji has an old flash sync like this. Sometimes if you don't want to use a wireless system, this can work very well. I know a lot of people complain about the dials on the T3. For me, this wasn't anything particularly difficult, and I didn't come from an XT2 before I came to the T3. I actually came from an older X Pro, and there's no dials, but for me, I leave them unlocked all the time, and they're easy enough. You can actually just sort of move with your thumbs. You could look right through the viewfinder and see everything that's happening on your viewfinder without really having to look up at the top of the camera. And if you just turn them inwards, it raises both the shutter speed and the ISO. Going to the Canon, this is definitely one of the easiest cameras that I've ever bought to figure out. I think it maybe took a day or so. The menu is laid out very nicely. Again, there's not a ton of features to really bog down the menu system, but nonetheless, who hates a camera that is easy to pick up and use right away, and it's not hard to figure out or set up. Now, going to the lenses on the Canon, you do get the adapter, which is free with, as far as last I checked, the adapter is free with the purchase of the R and the RP, I believe. Which is great because you get to use all of Canon's EF lenses. Now, a lot of them are older, they're not going to focus as fast. So if you are a sports shooter or someone, well, if you're a sports shooter, I don't think you would really even want this camera in the first place. But if you are someone who just takes portraits and you don't need ultra fast autofocus, the old lenses have amazing image quality. And at the price point, it's hard to argue against the Canon system. So comparing the two screens, I didn't notice a huge difference to my eye, although I'm typically looking through the viewfinder when I'm using my camera. But the Fuji does seem a little bit better. The colors seem to come through a little bit better on this camera than they do on the Canon. However, to me, I didn't notice a huge difference. The brightness on this camera is plenty fine for shooting outside, and you still see the sample of your image, which is really all it is just a sample of what you're going to get before you actually get it into post. All right, the flip screens on these. Let me start with the Canon. A lot of people like this type of flip screen. You can see it, you can vlog. I'm shooting on a Canon R right now, and it has a flip screen. I borrowed it from a friend, and it's really nice. But again, for someone who isn't a vlogger, doesn't shoot a lot of video, for me, this was a little bit more cumbersome than the Fuji was. So if I'm shooting something up high, I actually have to take this out, flip it around to even be able to get something that's going to be usable. Where, come over to the Fuji, if I want to shoot something up high, one button pops out, you're good to go. You want to shoot something low, something high, it's not going to be a problem. Now, it doesn't articulate 360, it doesn't flip around, but again, that's not something I ever used, and that wasn't ever really a problem for me. I actually prefer the Fuji on this quite a bit. Lastly, for the Fuji, it does feature dual card slots. They're both UHS 2. They didn't play around on this. Unfortunately, the Sony has one UHS 2, one UHS 1. I don't know why they didn't just do dual UHS 2, but that's another video. This camera has what really every camera should have, dual UHS 2 card slots. You only get one on the RP, and for some people that may be a deal breaker. I think if you buy good cards, you probably won't have to worry about it too often, especially if it's a newer card. However, this may be something that people can't get around. Along with this body not being weather sealed, some people may consider it maybe an entry-level body, and I chose to actually go to the RP and start selling off my Fuji stuff. Now that was something that was kind of surprising even to myself. I'll probably upload a video in a month or so and see, maybe I regret it. But as far as right now, having a full frame camera with cheaper glass, that has an ecosystem that I really believe in. If you've noticed some of the RF lenses that are coming out, you can tell that Canon is not playing around. To me, I was hesitant at first because the M50, unfortunately, didn't get a lot of lenses, and I think that Canon kind of dropped the ball on that. I know they were trying to make something in line with the M5 and the M6, but the RP has lenses that are going to be used in the future. So if you ever want to get rid of this body, your lenses are not going to be anything that you're going to have to worry about. Now again, with this camera, I considered using a hybrid system with the T3 and the RP, but the problem for me was the expensive glass, because then you have to worry about focal ranges, getting glass that's going to be a good fit on this body and this body, whereas if you go with this body, you could even buy something like a 5D Mark III, and I've seen them for around $1,000, not too bad. Even if you got two of these bodies, the 70-200 Canon lens, I think I got the version 2, was only $500. I think the 50-140 on the Fuji is over $1,000. I've never even owned that lens. It was hard for me to justify buying it at that price point, whereas I feel like I can get a lot more glass with this. The 85-1.8 only cost me about $350, whereas the 56-1.2 is going to be much more expensive. And the 56-1.2 is a great lens, but to me, the gold ring Canon 85-1.8 is just as good. And in the full frame, you are going to get equal, if not very close to the same depth of field with the 1.2 on the crop compared to the 1.8 on the full frame. Now the battery lives on these two cameras are not great compared to DSLRs, compared to the Sony Z battery. You're not going to get a ton of shots. However, the Fuji definitely wins on this one. The Canon has a smaller battery that was from the M6 and the M5. It's not terrible, but it's something that you're definitely sacrificing if you choose to get the RP instead of the R. In my opinion, just buy some more batteries, and I don't mind switching them out, but it was a sacrifice that I was willing to make. Overall, this camera, for me, someone who shoots portraits and slow-moving subjects, was a more attractive camera in the sense that it is full frame. The lenses are way cheaper, and when I say way cheaper, I mean way cheaper. Don't take my word for it. Go on eBay, go on Adorama, look at some of these used EF lenses, and see if this camera could be for you or not. For me, I was able to afford a lot more focal ranges, a lot more lenses, with a camera that I think has equal colors, if not, just as good for my portraits without really sacrificing anything. The autofocus is probably just as good. Now, I didn't mention the eye autofocus before, and that's something that definitely is not as good as it is on the Fuji. The eye auto, I would not trust on this camera. So if you're someone who wants eye auto and you're considering one of these two, I would definitely steer you towards either this camera or maybe the 7 III, which also has great eye autofocus. However, if you're looking for a camera that is sub $2,000 and you want something that can sort of do it all, I would say the Fuji would probably be the camera for you. I'm not going out and shooting sports, I'm not shooting race cars, then the Canon RP is just fine. And for me, it gives me the option to get into a full frame camera, get into an ecosystem that I know is going to last. Now, that's not to say you can't adapt EF lenses to the Fuji. However, if you want to use both of these cameras in conjunction, then it's going to be difficult as far as getting focal ranges that work on both bodies. So for me, I decided to jump into the Canon system. I'm actually borrowing this T3 from a friend just for this video, and I'll let you guys know in a month if I'm still using this thing or if I just hated the decision I made. But so far, I will say that this camera has amazing image quality. I know the dynamic range isn't as good as the Fuji. Having a short stint with the A7 III, having shot Fujis for a couple of years now, in my opinion, I can safely say that this is the most comfortable camera I've ever held. I don't have huge hands, which I think is a problem that's easily fixed with the grip, but even without the grip, this camera is very comfortable to use, and honestly makes me want to go out inside and shoot. So for me, this was the better option at this time. I want to go shoot this camera. It's very easy to use the autofocus with the touchscreen. The lenses, I have way more focal lengths at a cheaper price, or even if you want to say the same price, but with more lenses than the Fuji. Alright, so I'll see you guys in about a month or so and tell you if I'm regretting switching to this system, or if the Canon RP really is as good as I think it is.